Holly, thanks for joining us. I'm glad we had a nice opportunity to catch up as we get ready for the Process and Performance Online Summit this year. And you've had some great insights to what you see organizations doing. And so I'd like to just ask you a couple questions and have a casual conversation as we get some insights from you, if that's okay with you today.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Jonathan, for the time to have this chat.
Absolutely, absolutely. So excuse me, I'm gonna look at my notes here real quick just so I don't forget. But when we, I guess the question is, how do you see process and performance professional really challenging their as-is within their organizations today, as that's our theme for the conference this year?
I think that's kind of a multifold question. First off, I think it's really just part of our day job. As we're taxed into doing things like operational excellence, continuous improvement, and ensuring work gets done effectively and efficiently, it's part of our job to question how things are going, to look and see if there's better ways to do things. And that kind of encapsulates that challenging the as is. I also think it's part of our DNA as process and performance management people. So we did a study earlier this past year, and it was really looking at the people of process, who they are, what they do, what drives them, where they're going. And one of the big questions we asked is, so what drew you to process management in the first place? And the number one reason that came out was this idea of a desire to make things better. Okay. I think we had some great quotes on that. Like, some people said they observed how process design was detrimental to their staff and their customers, and they wanted to change it. Others had said that desire to work more efficiently, to get to the root cause and find solutions. So kind of this job in general is kind of ingrained in challenging the as-is to make things better. One of the best examples I've seen from an organization perspective was Cargill. So they had an ERP transformation in 2008. And not surprising, it was very, very technical focused. They wanted to rapidly roll out this technology. So in their planning and their implementation, it was all about the feasibility. And what happened was that it wasn't working. They had to spend a lot of interaction with different of the businesses groups, kind of supporting the processes, supporting how it was going to be adopted, and re-optimizing things. So instead, what they did is they had their business process consulting team then kind of challenge how they did it. And what they did then was work on securing alignment, change management, optimizing the processes, all before that particular area had their ERP system rolled out. And it's just kind of one of the little ways that we do this every day. I'm going to say, I think one other big thing is that, though this was the theme initially when we planned it, it's still a very applicable theme today, because as you can see, as we're all in this virtual environment, we're having to challenge the as-is and executing our work as well.
Completely agree. And I love your first example there of it's kind of in our nature. I think we kind of have this curiosity within our process and performance DNA, and even the people that you and I have an opportunity to interact with, that they, how can we make this better? What can we do differently? Or, I know this is the way that we've always done it, but that excuse doesn't necessarily fly anymore. So no, I completely agree. And I think that I think it's a very apropos theme this year. So as organizational programs continue to mature, how do they not get complacent? How do they say, well, we've been changing, there's no more change for us left to do, or we don't want to change anymore because we feel we've already changed enough? So what do they do to try to avoid some of that complacency?
I think because we're proponents of continuous improvement, we have to keep that mindset and lead by example as well, that we are going to have to shift. We're going to have to always take evaluation of what we're doing and how it's supporting the business. This also came up in our 2018 priority survey, where I think it was like over 80% of the people said process management had to change to stay relevant. So it was really looking at the idea that we can't be complacent as process people. We have to rethink about our approaches, the value we bring, the tools that we use in the work that we do to make sure it's optimized for the business. We've got a couple of really great examples of how some organizations have completely challenged the as-is of their process program. And two of the best ones I've seen are actually speakers at the summit this year. Yeah. The first one, I believe, Collins Aerospace is going to be presenting here shortly. They have 20 years of process focus, but what it wound up having was a very kind of stringent Three-part to get into even looking at the improvement and prioritizing them. They had 10 steps just before you could even say yes or no, there's an improvement opportunity here. And Wes Ralph was the individual who's going to be speaking. He decided to take an experiment with a simpler approach, and it focused on training, communication with leaders, and really that employee empowerment aspect that was necessary to change how they did things.
Yeah.
And the second example is UPS, and I believe they're going to be speaking on Thursday. Yep. They also had a long history of a process thinking culture, even going back to the 1940s. But because they continue to grow through a series of mergers and acquisitions, plus some natural growth, they felt that that part of their DNA was no longer really core. So what they wanted to do was kind of shake up and rethink how they were getting process embedded into the organization. So they created a center of excellence, and they used a lot of different methods, including voice of customers, and to help overhaul that and look at their training and look at their support efforts, all to help, again, once empower that business so that they had some control. And because there was something that was being done with them rather than to them, they really started thinking in that process improvement mindset.
I think that's a great example. And I used to have a friend that worked at UPS, and their process focus goes all the way down to drivers and how they turn off the trucks and what finger the key ring goes on in terms of easy access and that type of thing. And they've had a lot of studies done by Army Corps of Engineers. So that process orientation with that organization is absolutely on the forefront of their minds. And then the last question that I wanted to, I'm sorry, not the last question. The third question I wanted to ask you is, we have a panel coming up later this week, really asking people kind of what is your favorite tool in your operational excellence toolkit? So I know I have mine, but I'll let you go first. What are some of your favorite tools, or what is your favorite tool in your operational excellence toolkit, if you don't mind, that you see our members and clients use?
Well, I've got two of them, but the first one's kind of a cheat tool.
Okay.
It's human-centric design or design thinking. And I really like that one because it's actually multiple methodologies and tools all wrapped up into one, which is part of what I think makes it really attractive, right? Because it combines the ethnography, right? The ability to use anthropological methods of observation so that you really understand what is the root cause issue, how people are doing things, and what are those kind of real pain points and value drivers. It also has brainstorming and coming up with new ideas, and no idea is a bad idea. But I think one of the other key aspects of there is using a mix of perspectives. So from different roles within the organization, gender, age groups, just to try and get that new viewpoint on what's going on from that, and also looking at that customer point of view. So the third part is the agile aspect. Agile is baked into design thinking because of that fail fast and the cyclical nature of it. And what that really does is help us continue to test out things, understand what's going to work, what's not going to work, while keeping that customer at the focal point. My second favorite tool is probably customer journey maps, for very similar reasons. They let you see the big picture, from what are the processes that are involved, what are the performance management look like in it, what are the pain points, but at the same time they help transform your perception about the end user, who they are, what drives them, and really humanizes them. And then that helps make that kind of a person problem rather than something that may be just a technical feasibility issue. So kind of on the flip side then, Jonathan, what are your favorite tools?
Well, my favorite tools use none of the big words that you used in the beginning of your conversation there. But I have one that I go back to, and it's probably because we work with a lot of clients on it, is really just the framework. And again, whether you use APQC's process classification framework or some other framework within the organization, we find that the framework really establishes that foundation. And we have slides that we work with a lot of clients on, and that framework really anchors the enterprise, and it outlines the what you have to do, but the how you do it, the way you reorganize the process that fits your business, and then how you tie that process maybe into more end-to-end or cross-functional process. I think it all starts with the framework, and it really creates that common language for individuals across the organization. So There's a ton of case studies that we have out there that you've been kind enough to share. We have videos on there on our website from a framework perspective. But I think when we start to talk to clients about process design, end-to-end process, or the power of the framework, that really establishes organizations from an operational excellence point of view.
I think that's also a great point added onto that idea of challenging the as is, right? So you don't have to just always look at kind of the new cool methodologies. Things that are fundamental, like frameworks, are absolutely vital. And some of that current state assessment or challenging that as is really is figuring out where they fit in that mix, and just reevaluating all of the pieces and how they work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another one that to add to that as well is that's maybe not new is just a benchmarking activity. And if you go back to what Jack Grayson says, really having, benchmarking is the ability to say, hey, I'm immature at this, or I'm not the best at this. Let me see if I can learn from other organizations that are. And benchmarking is not new. It's probably not going anywhere. But if you really want to challenge the as is, and you're kind of mature enough to say, hey, I'm going to put a stake in the ground here, and I might not like where that stake lands, but at least I know where I am. And that way I know where I might need to go.
Excellent addition.
The last question, and this is the last one, Holly, that I wanted to ask is, how have you seen the focus of process and performance management programs change over the years? I know you do a lot of studies on this. I know you do surveys, you get input from a lot of our clients and members that we specifically work with. So, what have you seen that has really changed over the years, or do you see changing in the future?
I say in the early days of working in this topic area, a lot of the focus was on cost cutting, improving productivity, looking at quality. And while those are still important aspects to how process management works, it actually is kind of really heartening to see the fact that there's been a shift from process management as kind of more an operational focus to being a strategic enabler. Because we've seen it in a lot of different ways. We're seeing process teams being part of transformation programs, because anytime you do a major change, usually there's a process involved in it somewhere. We see them linked to PMOs because of that, and as part of project teams for project management offices. We've seen them really blossom and grow in digital transformation programs lately, looking at how they provide the structure for these sorts of things. So it's been really interesting to kind of see the metamorphosis over the years. And it was kind of, it's been reinforced with the current survey that we've got out right now. So we have a survey out looking at process programs, and it's kind of looking at, their resources, how they execute things, what are their practices. And one of the questions we wanted to know was, so what is the primary focus of your process management program? Because we want to be able to understand, if the focus is different, then do your resources look different? Do your practices look different? And so the early kind of data that we pulled this morning looks at it and is like the number one is supporting the execution of strategic initiatives. The second is then supporting a culture of continuous improvement. It's when we get down into some of the lower ones, so we start to see, number three is understanding process through documentation. But quality management, looking at cost cuttings, didn't make the top three this year. So we are definitely starting to see a kind of a major shift in process and performance management's role in the organization.
And I think that's so interesting that you talk about the strategic alignment that these process people need to have, and really tying it to the alignment of the business, and it can tie into the 7 tenets exercises that we have within APQC, but it also ties into, even if you're not a kind of a 7 tenets adopter, it ties into value mapping or value pathing. It ties into how you're developing and what end-to-end processes you've identified within the core organization. So I think you're right. I think it's a real strategic shift that we're starting to see our members and our audience make as they look to really mature their organizations. So Holly, with that, I'll thank you very much for your time. It was great catching up with you. I know we'll see you throughout the online summit. We're not together this year, obviously, but thanks for your time. Thanks for being here, and we'll connect again soon.
Thank you very much, and I hope everybody has a great summit.
Thanks, Holly. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.